What, when, and how. This is our three-step process that we're going to use to find out how should we proceed. Let me explain to you what, when, and how is. We're going to go back to our AP and BP. Remember, BP means before price, AP means after price. Let me explain. Listen close. BP, we need to know what so that we can find out when, because we can't find out how. Let me explain. BP, we need to know what the objection is. Once we know what the objection is, we then can find out when that objection will be taken care of. But we can't find out how they're going to pay because we haven't given them the price, because we're BP. You can tell I used to watch the Three Stooges, because BP, you need to know what so that you can find out when, because you can't find out how. But AP, you don't necessarily need to know what, but you do need to know when so that you can find out how. Let me explain how that works for you again. So BP, we need to know what the objection is, so that we can find out when that objection will be taken care of. But we can't find out how because we haven't given them the price. AP, I don't necessarily need to know what, but I do need to know when so that I can find out how. What that means is, if I know when they will take care of the objection, I don't have to know what the objection is. But once I know when, I can figure out how. And that customer can tell me because they have seen the price. So you give a customer a price and they say they can't afford it. Now what we're going to do is we know the what. The what is the price. I've got to now find out when. How do I find out when? I use the walk of life. So it would go something like this. Well, you know what? We're just not going to be able to afford that. Well, Mr. Jones, how much did you think it was going to be? Oh, I was thinking maybe $4,000 or $5,000. Well, now that you see what we do and how we do it, can you understand why it's a little more than you thought it was going to be? Yeah, I mean, I can understand that, but still more than what we can afford. Well, now that you've seen the price, about how long would it take you to come up with the rest of the money? As soon as he gives you a time, we've now converted it to when. So let's say he says it's going to be 2 or 3 months. Now I have to find out how. So you say, well, how long would it take you to come up with the rest of the money? He says 2 or 3 months. Then I would say, well, in 2 or 3 months, Mr. Jones, would you be writing a personal check or would you be taking advantage of one of our payment options in 2 or 3 months? And as soon as he picks one, we now know how. So let's think about this. AP, we don't necessarily need to know what, but we do need to know when so that we can find out how. Now, that first example that I just gave, we knew what the what was. The what was price. Let's take an example of I don't necessarily need to know what. Let's say you give a customer a price and that customer says, listen, we're not going to be able to do this right now. I don't need to know what the reason is why they can't do it. I just need to know when they're going to be able to do it. So when he says we're not going to be able to do it right now, then what I'm going to say is, Mr. Jones, now that you've seen the price, when do you think you might be in a position to do something like this? And as soon as he gives me a time, oh, it's going to be 2 or 3 months, then all I have to do is find out how. And I would say, Mr. Jones, in 2 or 3 months, would you be paying with a personal check or would you be taking advantage of one of our payment options? And when he answers that question, now I know how. But guess what? It didn't matter what the reason was because I knew when. Let's review that because it can be a little bit confusing. I don't necessarily need to know what if I know when, because then I can find out how. What, when, and how is designed for you to be able to figure out how to proceed. So if you're ever working together or you're working by yourself and you're trying to figure out what do I need to do or how do I proceed when a customer tells me this, you use what, when, and how. If you know what, then you know you have to find out when, BP. You also got to understand that you can't find out how. In BP, all we need to know is what the objection is and when it will be taken care of. The rest of it will take care of itself after we give them the price. So BP, you need to know what so that you can find out when, because you can't find out how. AP, you don't necessarily need to know what, but you do need to know when so that you can find out how. And really, to sum all of this up, our entire system is designed to figure out how. If you figure out how, you help your customer.